Hello, it's Jeannie, and I am back with you this Thursday just to talk a little bit about how you handle it, or how do you know when a decision that you have to make or a situation that you have to deal with is of you or is of God. I just want to share a little story. It was a little over 22 years ago that I got contacted to get a new job that was a really good job, but it was going to move us far away from our home, our family, our friends. Our sons had just gotten into some new schools over the past 2 years before that, and in the time of that, I was offered that job position. And I got to tell you that at that point in time, things were just new to us in the new home, and so it was a tough situation. And the seas in our house, the rough seas, kind of showed up in force. And when that happened, it caused some tension. It caused tension between me and my sons. It caused tension between me and my husband. And it just felt like it was very difficult and hard. And it was hard to decide whether this was of God or whether it was me. Was I just trying to pursue it for myself? And it's always difficult to figure that out. So how do we know that? How do we know whether we're supposed to make that big leap or not? How do we know, excuse me, how do we know if it's God? How do we know if it's us? How do we know if it's just coincidence or whatever? And what I want to share with you is that in that time, my husband and I had a lot of hard conversations. We had some just tough decisions, tough discussions. He'd always lived in the state that we were living in, and he couldn't even fathom moving out of this state. And for me, I was the one who had moved all over the country with my dad because he was in the Navy, and so it was not a difficult situation for me. And I got to say that it was just rough. It was rough seas. Sometimes it felt like that we were going to capsize, that there wasn't going to be anything to hold us together. But what I know is that we prayed, that in spite of the challenges, in spite of the differences that we had, in spite of the differences of opinion, we chose to stand together and we prayed. We didn't agree on everything. It was super difficult. But in the long run, what the bottom line that you have to do is that you have to get with God, and you have to do it together, even when there's division or separation, or when those rough seas are just threatening to overtake you. So we did that, and in the midst of all of that, I can tell you that at one point in time, God just showed me this vision. He had taken me to a place where I was just to a place where I was just in a really hard place. I didn't understand why God would have even opened that door, opened that window for me, if it wasn't something that He had for me and all the promises that came with it. So anyway, so what happened is my husband and I prayed together. It took a long, hard time, but ultimately we came to know from God, that it was His will. And the way that happened is that God actually aligned our dreams, literally the physical dreams that we had at night, to show that we were supposed to go to that place, even though it wasn't something that was the most comfortable thing for us. God doesn't always take us to the comfortable places. He doesn't always do it the way that we want. He doesn't always do life the way that we want. But what I know is that Jeremiah 29:11 says that He knows the plans He has for us. They are plans to prosper us and for a future. They're to give us hope and not to hurt us. And that's what we stood on. We stood on the fact that if we followed Him and we trusted Him in spite of all of the changes, in spite of the difficulties in our marriage and to our kids and all of those things, that God had His hand on us, and He knew what He was doing. So we did that, and I got to tell you that now 22 years later, He not only moved us to Texas, but He moved us to Virginia, and we're still far away from our families and friends, and it's difficult sometimes, but sometimes you just have to stay the course, because that's what God would have you to do. I hope this is a blessing for you. I look forward to talking with you again next Thursday.